Hi, folks. This is Mr. Thomas, your friendly neighborhood DMPT 2615 intermediate editing instructor. And this is the first video that I'm making for the craft of editing with Premiere Pro. And as I said in the walkthrough video, there are several projects that we're going to do over the course of the semester, and they're going to come out of a book called The Craft of Editing with Final Cut Pro, a comprehensive curriculum for video editing technique by Michael Wohl. Now, we are not going to use Final Cut Pro in this course. Okay, specifically Final Cut Pro 6, which is a version of Final Cut Pro that's more than 15 years old. We're not going to be using that. That was the basis of the textbook that the lessons that we're going to be using for these projects that they come out of. But the great thing about the textbook is that it talks specifically about how to use Final Cut Pro 6, like what button you push, but it's more of an immediate to an advanced level text. So it talks less about that and more about the craft of the edit. That is, what workflow or what series of steps do you go through in order to edit certain genre or styles of video. For example, you would not edit a documentary the same way you'd edit a music video. And you're not going to edit a music video the same way you would edit a comedy scene or an action scene, a fight scene, or a chase. Okay, there are very specific stylistic things that you need to do, and also technical things that you need to do that are specialized for different types of scenes that you're going to edit, that you can edit. And this textbook steps you through or takes you through different genre of films, and it gives you exercises and instruction on how to edit a particular genre of film. Now, I call it, the book is leaning towards application agnostic. And what that means is that, yes, they apply this knowledge specifically to Final Cut Pro. However, if you know Premiere well enough, and I hope we do, we're approaching the point where we know Premiere well enough, we can take the instruction, the workflow on how to edit different genre of film and apply it to Premiere Pro. This textbook is a wealth of knowledge. This is something that will take your skill as an editor from being just like basic, hey, I know how to operate Premiere on a basic level, and it'll advance you to the point where, hey, now you're an editor, okay? Because a person who can operate Premiere is not the same thing as an editor, okay? So let's pick up where we left off in DMPT 2600 basic editing. You know, the last project that you did was the rough cut of Hope. And just taking a quick look at it, you know, it's a basic dialogue scene, primarily because of the fact that it's two people sitting across a table talking to each other in the scene. Okay, the vast majority of the work that you'll start out doing, and even after you get into the industry,
Mr. Roth,
the vast majority of the work you'll do will be basic dialogue scenes like this. Okay. So she sits down in a chair.
I need your help.
And they start to talk to each other.
I need to find someone.
That's a huge majority of the work that you'll do in film. It's just like this. However, a lot of work is a lot more complex than just two people sitting across a table from each other talking to each other. Okay, the roots of everything you need to know to be an editor is in the basic dialogue scene of Hope. Okay, however, you know, you will often have scenes that are more complex. Okay, for example, editing a complex dialogue scene. Dialogue just means they're mostly talking. Okay, editing a complex dialogue scene differs from editing a basic dialogue scene in that, number one, in complex dialogue scenes, there are more than two characters, okay? Like in this basic dialogue scene, we only have Anne and Roth, and of course the waitress dips in for a second, but that's no big deal. In a complex dialogue scene, we could have a lot more characters than two or three. Number two, in a complex dialogue scene, the characters aren't just sitting in a chair. Anne comes in, sits down, the waitress comes in, pours coffee, leaves, Roth gets up and leaves. That's super duper basic as far as the blocking. Blocking is basically movement of the character or the camera, or both, during a scene. So if Anne walks towards the booth and sits down, that's Anne's blocking. If the waitress approaches a table, pours coffee, and leaves, that's the waitress's blocking, okay? So we have far more complex movement of characters in complex scenes. So we need to know how to edit that, okay? Let's take a look at, well, actually, let's talk about a few more things you may see in complex scenes. For example, complex scenes, they require well thought out footage. So that basically means a complex scene starts way before it actually gets to your editing rig. A complex scene is something that's written by the screenwriter and something that's well thought out and executed on the set, recorded on the set by the director of photography, the actors, and everybody else on set, okay? So a complex scene requires a lot more complicated work on their behalf as well. And you'll be able to tell when they're doing more complex work when you get their footage, okay? For example, if characters are moving from place to place during a scene, doing a lot more complex blocking than what we see in the Hope scene, they're moving from what we call mark to mark, okay? So if Anne starts at the front door of the diner, that's her first mark. If she walks to the booth in the diner, that's her second mark, okay? So essentially, at each one of these marks in a complex scene, think of marks as almost like keyframes or stops or places where the character is standing still. So the mark at the door and the mark at the booth, then you have the transition where Anne walks from the door to the booth, okay? So on either side of that transition, there are marks, where she starts and where she ends, okay? So you see a lot more of that with complex scenes. The transitional elements you'll see in complex scenes, I just mentioned those, that's where she's actually, or characters are actually moving. You have to have some way to shoot how a character gets from their first mark to their second mark. And there are many different ways they can do that. With complex footage, you'll see a lot more detail in how you shoot the movement of a character from place to place. Also, in complex dialogue scenes, you'll see a lot more insert shots, cutaway shots, and reaction shots, okay? We see a few inserts and cutaways in the Hope scene, but not nearly as many as you would see in a complex scene, okay? So those are just some of the things that you'll see in a complex dialogue scene as opposed to a simple dialogue scene like this. Everything you did in the Hope project, you need to make sure you have a solid, firm grasp of those skills. We're not starting from scratch here, folks. You're going to transfer your knowledge from the Hope project, and we're going to build on it for the Chapter 2, Editing Complex Dialogue scene. The scene is from a television series called FBI Guys. FBI Guys. And it's a comedy, okay? It's kind of like the show The Office, but in an FBI department. And so, so you want to, like I said, you want to bring all your skills from editing a basic dialogue scene and build on it. Let's take a look at our project panel here. So everything that we were doing, like organizing our clips in labeled bins properly, that we're going to retain that. However, the system of organization, we're going to give you some alternatives, some other ways of organizing your media, or we call it media management within Premiere. How am I going to label these clips? What are the bins going to be labeled? How am I going to organize which source clip goes into which bin? You want to have a firm grasp on that, because when you have your media organized, that speeds up your pace of editing. So that means that when you have clips that you need properly labeled in properly labeled bins, you can get to them much quicker, and that's going to increase your speed of editing. Okay, so that's very important. Okay, so in this case, we pretty much put our master clips, we put our source clips in bins that are labeled after the master clip scene and the shot label, we'll call it. 1B1, 1B2, and 1B4 all go into a bin labeled 1B. Any clip that has a 1 and a B in it goes in the 1B bin. Okay? So that's a really basic way to do it, but that's not always the best way to do it, as we're going to see in lesson 2 in the text. Okay, so let's take a look at what we're doing in lesson 2. I'm going to go File, Open Project, and I'm going to open the Premiere Project Complex Dialog. You should have this Premiere Project file, this PRPROJ file. You should be able to you should have downloaded that from my Google Drive, and not only will you have the Premiere Project file, which is like the recipe for how all these clips are going to be edited together, but also the media, that is the actual footage that was shot itself. All of that is available in a zipped folder on Google Drive. Please make sure you download that before you attempt doing the exercise. So I'm going to open the Premiere Project file. Okay, and I'm going to close this timeline panel that applies to the Hope dialogue scene. I'm going to close out everything that's related to the Hope scene, so I don't confuse myself as far as which project I'm working on. By the way, I'm clicking on a bin panel. These three lines, these three horizontal lines, that's a panel menu. I'm going to click on a bin panel menu, choose close panel from the contextual menu that pops up to get rid of that, clear that out. Okay. Get rid of all of these. There's probably an easier way I could do this, but we'll just suffice it. We'll let this suffice for now. Okay. So let's take a look at the Project 2 Complex Dialogue project panel, okay, or lesson 2, that's what the book calls it. All right, so basically I have a bin called Organized Clips, and as you can see, instead of having bins labeled like 1B, 1C, 1D like I did before, I have bins labeled after different portions of the scene. For example, our two protagonists, these two FBI guys, they enter a boardroom. And so everything that happens involving them entering the boardroom, before they go through the door and just after they go through the door, we're going to keep that in its own bin called entrance, because you'll probably edit those shots together. Okay, so I'm going to double click on this first one.
Action.
Where I have the two
Wait.
agents about to enter the boardroom.
Showed our intel to Decoy and Willoughby.
Right, okay, and I'm going to say the guy took the first swing, all right?
Gentlemen.
Man knocks on the door to God, asking for enlightenment. Man awakens when he sees he is knocking from the inside.
Action.
Okay, so as you can see, that scene is from their entry into the boardroom, and we have a reverse, or we have a shot on the inside of the boardroom when we see them walk in. Same scene, run the same way,
Boys,
same portion of the scene.
Man knocks on the door to God, asking for enlightenment. Man awakens when he sees he is knocking from the inside.
So as you can see, we have a different angle on the same action. Different angle, they come in. Continuation of the scene, and they sit down. So the two shots that we saw and two others that we didn't see yet, they're all related to the agents entering the boardroom. Okay, and that's how we're organizing it, because you may start the scene, editing the scene by editing their entrance, and it would be these three shots: 43A take 2, 43MA take 2 MS, or 43MA take 2, 43U take 1, and 43W take 2. You'll probably edit those 4 shots together to start off your scene. Okay. And think of your editing like that. We're not going to edit the whole scene from beginning to end all at the same time. We're going to compartmentalize. We're going to break the scene down into individual units, like their entrance, the main scene, and the ending. That's basically how they've made your bins here. And that's how they've organized the clips in the bins. Okay? So it makes it easier if you think of the scene as broken down into little smaller, I would like to call them beats, but that's not strictly the definition of what a beat is. But think of breaking down a large scene into small portions, smaller, more manageable chunks. And you would focus on editing these individual chunks. And after you've edited each individual chunk, you put all the chunks together, and that's your entire scene. So in these bins, we have our clips. You can see in the main scene bin, we have a bin called Agents, which is a master shot of the whole scene from the perspective of the boss, because that's his shoulder there. It's an over the shoulder from the boss to the agents. It's a very interesting way to do a master shot. It doesn't have to be just it doesn't have to be an inner scene where you just see the whole room. You can show it from somebody's point of view. You can show a master shot from somebody's point of view. In this case, it's the boss's point of view. The boss is the person whose shoulder we're seeing there. Okay. All right. And we also have a boss's bin that's empty right now. It won't be for long. Okay. So that's the main scene. The ending scene, we have an agent's bin and a boss's bin, which are empty as well. So we're going to see as we go through this lesson, we're going to make selects or mark these source clips and then place them into these empty bins. Okay. There are about 25 clips or 25 source clips in this scene. Okay. And we know that this scene is the 43rd scene in this particular episode of this show. A scene is defined as everything that takes place in the same general location at the same time. So the general location that we have here is the boardroom of this FBI office. And it's everything that takes place within the 3 to 5 minutes of this meeting that they're having. So you can think of the definition of a scene is everything that takes place in the same place, everything that takes place in a scene in the same location at the same time. Now, I know we have outside of the boardroom and inside of the boardroom, and technically those are two different locations, but they're close enough to the point where in certain instances we can think of them as one location. Okay? If we were to have another scene, if we had another set of shots that took place out in the parking lot, that would be a separate scene because it's a different location, more than likely at a different time. If we had a different set of shots that takes place in, say, a surveillance room that's taking place at the same time as what's going on in the boardroom, it's still a different scene because, yes, it's taking place at the same time, but it's taking place in a different place. Okay? Say we were to have a set of shots that was in the same boardroom, but taking place a week later. It's a separate scene. Sure, it's in the same location, but it's at a significantly different time a week later. So our definition for a scene holds. Everything that takes place in the same place at the same time. Okay. Let's see. There are 25 clips in the scene, as I said. There are 6 different beats. I'm going to call them beats in the scene. Beats are basically, you think of them as bits, or like I said, those small chunks that we're talking about of a larger scene. There's 6 different beats in the scene. The first beat is the agents enter the room and sit down. The second beat is the agents have a brief exchange with a jealous coworker. The third beat is the boss enters and chews out the agents. The fourth beat is another agent explains how the 2 original agents, how their work was helpful to the department. The fifth beat is when the agents, our protagonist agents, get up to leave the boardroom. And the sixth beat is when the agents get up the nerve to ask for a promotion. Okay? And just in case you haven't gotten it yet, this scene is a simple boardroom scene in which 2 bumbling low-level FBI agents must face their boss after overstepping their authority and cracking a field case. Okay, so that's just a summary of what's going on in this scene. Okay, just as once again a bit of a review. Like I said, the shot label is 43B, take 4 in this particular case right here. Okay, the 43 refers to what scene it is in the film or the TV episode. The B refers to the camera setup or the angle. Anytime you place a camera in a location on a tripod and you start taking shots from that location, that's called a setup. When you pick up the camera and move it to a different portion of the room, set it down and start taking shots from that angle, that is a different setup. Many times you will take more than one shot from the same setup, the same camera setup. For example, from B, we have an over the shoulder from 43B. We have an over the shoulder from Blithers, that's this guy right here, to the rest of the boardroom. Now from 43B in a separate shot, I could zoom in on this FBI guy right here. Okay, say if I wanted to zoom in on him and give him some lines, I could take that shot from 43B without moving the camera from that setup. I could just zoom in on him, or I could fit a different lens on the camera body. Okay, and so that shot would still be called 43B, but I can't leave it just 43B because I already have a 43B. So I have to give it another name. I would call it 43BA. First time I went through the scene, 43BA take 1. If he messes up and I have to do it again, 43BA take 2, and so forth. Okay, so that's a little bit about the shot listing convention that we use to keep track of our shots. That's what you're going to be getting from the set. You'll get some sort of shot listing convention or shot listing system from the set. As far as if it's a shot listing system you're used to, well, if you've been working with these people for some time, you might be. But everybody has a slightly different interpretation for how their shots should be labeled. But the system that I just detailed to you is the most organized, is the most complete, is the most thorough. So if you get it following the system that I just gave you, if you get your shots like that, that's great. But if they don't give it to you like that, do your best to work out what they did give you. Okay, and work with what they gave you. Also notice we have a shot label, 43B, take 4. That's the shot label. We have a shot description after that, long shot, Blithers, over the shoulder, Phil, and Bob. Okay, 43C, take 2, that's the shot label. The shot description is medium, long shot, 3-shot ending. Okay, 43D, take 4, that's the shot label. The shot description is medium, long shot, Kenny crosses. Okay, so right here, under the name of the clip, we get 2 things, the shot label and the shot description. We start off the scene with the clips unorganized here. And we also have a nice bin here for sound effects. Okay, one of the reasons why we have more elaborate shot descriptions next to these shot labels is because of the fact that Even though we may have a close-up of a character, say for example, Phil sitting at a table performing a perfect reaction, like a shocked reaction or angry reaction, I may not be able to use that reaction during a part of the scene where he's supposed to be standing at the door. Okay, so in other words, you need to keep track of where and when in the story or in the scene actors are doing things. Okay, because of the fact that if Phil has a shocked reaction and he's sitting down, but in the story, Phil is supposed to still be standing up on the other side of that boardroom door. I know by common sense, I can't use the shot of Phil sitting down and reacting because we're not there yet in the scene. So in order to communicate exactly where and when we are in a scene, we get these long descriptions, okay? Things like that, okay? Okay, another thing that I want to describe to you is basically how we break down a scene into smaller pieces. Okay, I think I mentioned that a scene can be broken down into beats. We'll go ahead and use that for now. But let's start at the beginning. At the very beginning, we have a whole film or a whole episode, whether it's a 2-hour film or a 30-minute TV episode. Okay, the next smaller unit of, we'll call it dramatic action. The next smaller unit of dramatic or narrative action, storytelling action, is the sequence, okay? A sequence is a group of related scenes, okay? So, for example, if I define for you a scene is everything that takes place in the same place at the same time. In this case, we're in the boardroom, but say we have a boardroom scene, which we do in the FBI headquarters. We have a parking lot scene in the FBI headquarters. We have a surveillance room scene in the FBI headquarters. Those three scenes together can be thought of as a sequence. We could call that the FBI headquarters sequence. Okay, so a sequence is a narrative unit that is made up of multiple scenes. Okay, a scene, which is the next step down, we said is everything that takes place in the same place at the same time, okay? A scene is made up of a bunch of different, of course, individual shots, all right? So all the shots in scene 43, they have a 43 at the head of the shot label, and they're all inside of, or just outside the door to the boardroom. So scenes are made up of different shots, okay? Now, within each shot, there is a beat, okay? Technically, in the sense that I'm talking about a beat now, I'm not talking about in the same context that I was talking about it before. I'm speaking in terms, when I say beat this time, I'm speaking more in terms of a beat from an actor's perspective. A beat is an emotional inflection or an emotional moment. Like say, for example, your actor is your character is talking to another character, and at first the main character is happy, okay, because the news they're getting from the person they're playing the scene with or the character they're talking to is giving them good news. But over the course of the scene, the news gets bad, and now our main character is angry. All right, so we go from happy to angry. Each one of those emotional inflections or emotional states, you can think of it as a beat, B-E-A-T, a beat, okay? And part of acting being authentic is not just whether I can play happy or I can play angry, but that transition going from happy to angry or angry to happy, how natural is that, okay? As an editor, as you know, you're not just cutting together shots, you're actually evaluating performances from the actors, and you're using the best performances that the actors give you. Sometimes you're taking bits and pieces of multiple separate takes or performances, and you are editing them together so it seems like one fluid performance. Okay, but in order to do that, you're not just randomly taking performances, randomly taking beats that they give you, randomly taking emotional inflections. It's like you have to plot out the progression from happy to angry in a transition from one mood to the other, and have a collection of shots that are edited together that smoothly transition us from one mood to the other. Okay, so really you're working with the actor, you're using what the actor gives you as an editor. Okay, we'll talk more about that stuff. That's more of the art of the edit stuff. We'll talk more about that later. One thing that I do, a couple more things that I do want, one or two more things I want to talk about before we end this video, because we're looking at a half an hour now, is in the tutorial, you're going to hear me many times talk about playing a select. A select is an in point and an out point in this case, a source clip, and it's in a source monitor here. I double click it into the source monitor. The in point shows where I want to start taking footage. The out point is where I want to stop taking footage of this much longer clip that I have loaded into the source panel. Okay, so one difference that you'll see in the PDF if you read that, and I strongly suggest that you do to get more engaged with this, is there's a function called play in to out. That means I want to just play the portion of this clip from the in point to the out point. All right. The keyboard shortcut they give you for Premiere is the keyboard shortcut that the PDF gives you for Final Cut Pro is different from the keyboard shortcut that you get from Premiere. That's not a big deal. You just look up the keyboard shortcut for play in to out for Premiere, and you'll find out that it is Shift plus spacebar. Okay, so I press and hold the Shift key, and I press the space bar.
You've turned this department on its ass. You two ever hear of protocol?
Sir, we did present the intel to...
Who told you to stand down? And now I have to answer to the brass as to why my top field agents couldn't clear this case. But two civilians blew it wide open. How do you think that makes me look to my superiors?
Sir, I'm responsible. It's my fault.
Oh, really, Angelina?
Angelino. Sir.
Well, Angelina.
Okay, so it's going to loop because that's how I have it set. But I just played from the in point to the out point. Okay, now this is another master. It kind of looks like the one we saw before, where we were looking over Blither's shoulder. We're looking over his right shoulder down this side of the table. Okay, and that was my master. This is a very similar shot where I see the other side, the other half of the room. This would be called a submaster. Okay, the widest angle that you can get that shows you all the characters in the scene, and it gives you an ability to get a good read or good understanding of who is in the scene, where are they located in this room, who is sitting next to whom. So as I edit, especially when I show reactions or eye lines, people looking at other people who are off screen, I have an idea of who they're looking at because I've seen a wider shot that shows me, for example, this character right here. If Blithers looks screen right, but I'm only seeing Blithers in a close-up, and I've seen this wide shot already of this agent right here, the senior agent, okay, then I know that when Blithers looks screen right, he's looking at this guy right here, even if he's not in the shot yet, okay, because I've already seen this master already. That's one function of a master. It allows you to set your cognitive map as a viewer, okay? So the viewers know, okay, what does this room look like? What's its orientation? Who is sitting next to whom? Who is to Blither's left? Who is to Blither's right? Who is screen right, which would be this senior agent? Who is screen left? Okay, we're going to talk more in terms of screen right and screen left rather than Blither's left and Blither's right, because that can get really confusing. If Blithers turns around, his left and right have swapped. But screen left will always be the left side of the screen from your perspective as a viewer. Screen right will always be the right side of the screen from your perspective as a viewer. So we have a master and a submaster. Okay, the first one was probably considered the master. This one is considered a submaster. When you look at shots like this, you generally don't have a whole lot of takes on these. You don't go through these a whole bunch of times because you're generally, as an editor, only going to use masters when you need them. And that will be at the beginning of the scene to establish your cognitive map. At the end of the scene, many times we'll bookend a scene. We'll start off with the master and then cut to the tighter shots of the conversation. And at the end of the scene, cut back out to the master and end the scene. Sometimes we'll do it like that. Many times, if a lot of complex movement has been going on, it's kind of confusing as far as where everyone is positioned in relation to everyone else. We'll cut back out to a master to remind the viewer where everybody is in relation to everyone else in the room. We can use masters like that. But masters are really kind of like the skeleton of the scene, because everything that happens in the scene, everything that's said in the scene is said in the master, and we usually lay the masters and the submasters down in the timeline first on like a video 1 track. I'm going to make a new timeline, make a new sequence by just dragging a sample of the footage to the new item button. Okay. So, and this is actually not the well. Master. I'll bring this master here. I'll just drop this really quickly. Okay. And so essentially, this is my master or submaster, is it? No, actually, this is not a submaster. Let me get a real submaster or a real master. Okay, so this is my master. And so I may drop this in my timeline first, as you can see here. But you know, I don't want to see the whole scene from a master. That's very boring, uninteresting. When Blithers is talking,
couldn't clear this case.
I want to see a close-up of Blithers. So what I would probably want to do is I would want to go find a shot of Blithers talking when he's saying
Field agents couldn't clear this case.
when he's saying that. I want to find a shot of him where he is saying that, and I'll use that instead of the wide shot. So it may be that's Blithers standing. Can't use that. See, this is why this is organized like it is, because if Blithers is standing, of course, I can't use that shot right now. I'm not going to replace the shot of him sitting with the shot of him standing that's tighter, because he's not doing that right now. Okay, so basically, masters are progressively replaced by the coverage shots or the tighter shots over time. Okay, and that's how masters are used. All right. So think of a master as a skeleton that I lay down first on the timeline as a means of establishing the viewer's overall mental map of the space. And these masters are eventually replaced with in the scene with tighter coverage shots that are closer shots of the characters and objects. And we do that for more emotional immersion. That means you can get the character, the audience rather, involved more and engaged in the scene. So the 6 steps in the workflow for editing complex scenes are as follows. First of all, you want to watch all of the source clips. All the source clips in the project.
Turn this department on.
Okay?
It's
You want to watch all the source
You
clips.
two ever hear of protocol?
Sir.
Not just one time, but at least 3 times for every source clip. And you want to watch it at regular speed.
Present the intel to.
Who stand down? And I have to press my feelings.
You don't want to watch it fast forward. You do not want to watch it fast forward. You need to be intimately aware of not just everything that happens on the screen frame by frame, but all the words, all the inflections, all the facial, inflections or business. Business is basically if a person picks up a coffee cup and moves it around on a table, it's like that's business. Business is anything having to do with handling of props, okay? You need to be aware of all of that, because all this stuff goes into your decision-making process as you're editing. So watch all the clips multiple times, at least 3 times from beginning to end, regular speed. That's step 1 in the workflow for complex scenes. Step 2, you want to label all the source clips in a useful way. That's kind of already done for you in this project. Step 3, you want to file the labeled clips into labeled bins. That's done for you as well. But this is a very important process that you need to know when you're editing a scene from scratch. Step 4, you want to create a new sequence based on the settings of the footage. And you saw me do that earlier when I dragged a sample of the footage over to the new item button down here, it gave me a timeline that has the same frame rate, the same image size, or the same resolution as the footage that we shot. So the timeline agrees with the footage you shot, or that was shot. That's how we create a new sequence, okay, based on the settings in the footage. Step 5, you want to lay out the structure of the whole scene by editing the master shot and the submaster, if you have one, to the timeline. You can see I started on that by editing this first clip to the timeline here. Okay, that's a master, okay, or master or submaster, you can call it whatever you want to call it. If I wanted to lay down the other shot, I'm gonna go to recent clips right here. Okay. You can think of these two shots as my master. My master, it shows the whole scene from beginning to end from a wide angle. The whole scene is there. Master, I have a reverse of this. My submaster, that's the reverse of it. Okay, it's kind of like a submaster. I'd lay those down first, and then I'm going to go about the process of replacing step 6. I'm going to replace each event or each beat or each portion of the scene with a tighter shot in the appropriate place. Okay, let's see if we can find something very quickly just to kind of give you an idea of what's going on with that. Okay, the shot where we have our other
You see us at all, Wes?
FBI guy, our envious
That's ugly. That's too
co-worker.
Okay. Connolly and Angelina. You know,
Connolly and Angelina is where
my
he says
years
that.
I've never seen anything like this. Who do you two think you are, the Lone Ranger and Tonto? You turned this department on its ass. You two ever hear of protocol?
Sir, we did present the intel to...
Now, I don't want to get too deep into the editing part of it yet, but a lot of what we have here is just this guy reacting, listening, okay? Very important. Don't just overlook this, because many times you're going to want to cut from shots of these two guys.
So congratulations.
You're going to want to cut from shots of these two guys talking to Blithers. This guy, this is not the right part of the scene, but you get the idea. Cut from this, from this shot and that shot. Sometimes you're going to want to cut to a reaction shot of this guy listening. Okay? Now, of course, you want to choose the portion of the clip where he has a correct facial expression based on what's going on the audio track, all right? Or the soundtrack, okay? So that's what we're doing. After we lay down our master shots, we're replacing portions of the master shot with tighter shots like this shot right here that more accurately, or more, let's say, more, that get the audience more engaged, that gets the audience more engaged in what's going on. Okay, that gets them more immersed in the story. So that's all I have for this first portion of lesson 2. This is really the first few pages, 3 or 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, about 6 or 7 pages of the PDF. I have it right here, and I will continue. I'll do a lot more hands-on on the subsequent videos where we actually, walk through the process of actually editing it. But now that we're all organized and we have kind of a ground level knowledge, basic knowledge of what we're trying to do here, I think we can move on from there. Thank you, and I'll see you in the next video.